Duncan says, if you want to know about business, health, and places to go, welcome to the show. Yeah, welcome to the show. If you know that you want to grow your business, your practice, and portfolio, welcome to the show. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Hello, and welcome to I'm Simply Saying, the healthcast where the spine meets strategy, alternative healthcare takes center stage, and we discuss how to build thriving medical clinics. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Frances Duncan, founder and CEO of Simply Southern Chiropractic Center in South Carolina. I'm a chiropractor by trade in an entrepreneur's body. I'm excited to guide you through this journey at the crossroads of chiropractic care, integrative medicine, and the art of successful clinic management. Lastly, if you take anything away from this episode today, please leave this podcast a 5-star review. Reviews allow us to hear from our listeners and what interests you. So, without further ado, let's get into the backbone of it all. Welcome to I'm Simply Saying.
And welcome to I'm Simply Saying. My name is Kelsey, and I am our host, Dr. Duncan's executive assistant. Before we get into our topic today, I just want to plug all the other ways that you can stay in the loop with Dr. Duncan and her practice. First, if you haven't already, check out Dr. Duncan's website, milliondollarchiro.co, where you can access all of our previous podcasts, you can check out our online courses, and you can have the opportunity to have one-on-one coaching with Dr. Duncan. Additionally, you can stay in the loop by checking out Dr. Duncan's social media at Million Dollar Chiro. You can listen to I'm Simply Saying on all popular streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Ultimately, wherever you listen, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Reviews help us know how we can best reach our community. We like to make viewing our podcast for other chiropractors and practice managers as easy as possible. So please note that all red thumbnails are more practice focused. If you are interested in the patient care side of things, that's going to be more of the yellow thumbnails. And then our guest speakers will be in the blue thumbnails to just kind of give you a bit of a guide. So this is the most effective way that we can keep all of our guests and our viewers interested in what they're interested in and wanting more from us. So without further ado, let's get started. Dr. Duncan, what are we talking about today?
Hello, everybody, and we are here today with a special guest. We have Dr. Iva Hughes, and she was president of the South Carolina Chiropractic Association a few years ago, and we are so excited to have her here on this podcast, and she's going to tell us about her journey as a practice owner and as president of our association. So, Dr. Hughes, we are so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us, and if you'll just start and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am Dr. Iva Hughes. I practice in Rock Hill and Chester, South Carolina. I actually started chiropractic through different channels than most people. I come from a long line of farmers and truck drivers and teachers, but my husband is about the 23rd chiropractor in his family.
Wow.
So it's a lot. There's a lot of history in the family. So that's kind of how we actually met at Palmer at chiropractic school, and he wanted me to come down here because Ohio's not great. It's a little colder up there, and his whole family's down here, and he's close to the beach, close to mountains. So as far as how I started, there's a couple different things. I was a massage therapist for about 10 years. And one of the first jobs I had, I was in a salon, and then I started working for a chiropractor, and seeing how much it changed people and how they could function. The big thing that kind of just blew my mind was we had a baby that was 2 weeks old, failure to thrive. The medical community had told the mom, we can't help you. He's pale gray. He's not thriving. He's probably going to pass away. And the doctor I worked for brought him into my massage room and laid him down and was like, what do you see? And I was like, I see a little bump. And he goes, yeah, his lumbar is out, and he adjusted it, and the baby went from gray to pink and started
Wow.
sleeping. And I was like, what was that? That was the coolest thing. So that really made me I already knew it was good because I'd been to the chiropractor before, but I didn't know how life-changing it could be. And then when I worked there, I got my x-ray tech, and then they finally told me they're like, you're wasting your time. Massage therapy is great, but you could do so much more. And Dr. John Urban was one of the associates there, and he goes, you're going to Palmer. And I went, okay. And everyone's like, no, go to my school. And I was like, no, Dr. Urban said Palmer, and I will go where he says. So that's where I started, and that's where I finished, and I loved it.
Well, I'm very proud to be a Palmer graduate myself, and I'm glad that's where I chose. I went to the Florida campus. You went to the original campus in Iowa, but was Palmer where you met your husband?
It is. We actually worked at the student union together for 3 years before we ever dated, and we didn't start dating until 6 weeks before he graduated. We're like, nothing like waiting until the last minute.
Oh, right. Did you know each other the whole time?
We knew each other the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, we were managers at the student union. We worked most of the events together, and we were just good friends. And then right before he graduated, I was like, you're kind of cute. Might as well. Like, let's see what happens. And now we have 2 kids, and we work together every day, and we don't kill each other, which is always a good thing.
That is a good thing. I'm not sure. I love my spouse. I'm not sure we could work together. I'm not sure he could work with me. So if you guys have been able to make it work, that is very special. So tell us then, did you know off the bat that you would move to South Carolina with him? Did you plan on that?
I hadn't planned on it when I was in Palmer. My first year, I went to Europe. Then I went to Switzerland, and then we went to Barcelona, and I fell in love with Barcelona. I was going to practice in Barcelona. No matter what, that's where I was going. And while I was in Palmer, my second year, someone was like, I don't think you should go to Barcelona. Somebody just got kicked out of the country because they took an x-ray.
Wow.
And I went, oh, that's not going to work. So then I ended up meeting my husband, actually getting together with my husband. I already knew him. And his thing was, I'll practice anywhere with you. We can go anywhere you want, but here's my selling points. I am 2 hours from the mountains. I am 3 hours from the beach, and we are 6.5 hours from your family. And I was like, sold.
Yeah, it's a pretty good location.
Yeah.
So.
It's beautiful. And I do like the weather. I could do without the pollen because I didn't know I had allergies, so I came here.
Oh, yeah, we just went through that pollen season.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started with talking about the association, the Chiropractic Association. So each state has their own association, and in South Carolina, we have a very active association. So tell us about your role with the association, and tell us about your time as president.
So I actually joined the association as a student, which I strongly encourage all students to do, because when you're a student, it's free, which is even better. And I was actually sponsored for my first convention by Roxanne Brayland. Dr. Brayland tries to sponsor a female chiropractor, which I think is awesome. She brought me in. I got to go to the seminars and see everything. It was great. And then, so from day one, even before I had my diploma, I was already a member. And my whole family, now husband's family, has been very involved. My father-in-law's he was the president like 8 years, I think, when it first started. My husband's been the president. I've been the president. And I've also been district director. You have to be district director before you can become the president, which is a good thing because you have to learn how everything works. And I've seen firsthand what it can do. I always talk about my bubble. I have my chiropractic bubble, and I have my Palmer bubble, which is all my people I went to school with. But then now I have my South Carolina Chiropractic Association bubble. I've made amazing friends. I've been in it for 19 years. And, we do fundraisers for legislation, because they protect your right to practice. That's why every state association you should join. I don't care what state you're in. You should be in your state association because they're protecting you. They're protecting your right to practice the way you want to on your own. They make sure that you are covered under insurance plans. Ours is exceptionally good. I've been to Costco where they have all the associations. I'm going to say we're the best. And honestly, a lot of people do model after ours. We've got a great attorney. We've got some of the best lobbyists in the state house, and they are constantly poring over legislation. So nothing slips by. There's no surprises. They send us updates if there is something that could possibly affect us. You'll get an alert, and if you don't open the email, they know it. So if you haven't opened it, they're going to call you and go, have you seen that? Did you call your senator? Did you talk to this person? Because they want to protect our rights to do what we should be allowed to do, which is serve the community.
So tell us, when did you serve as president of our association? What years?
So I came in I was president-elect, which is, we call it pre-presidency. Basically, you just kind of follow the president around, see what's going on. It was my president-elect was 2020 to 2021. So that was rough. We weren't allowed to meet in person. My actual presidency was the first year that we could meet in person. And that was 21, 22. So it was a lot. There was a lot of things that, they were still talking about masking and who was in charge of masking. And one of the good things about the association, they keep on top of that. And they would let you know, hey, mask mandates have been dropped in your county, or they've changed it. Now you can do this. And this is where you can get your PPE equipment. They also, one of the best things, because we have such great lobbyists and they have got such a great relationship with the governor, we were actually listed as non-essential, and they pulled Governor McMaster to the side and said, listen, you can't do this. Where are these people going to go? They're not allowed in hospitals. They can't go to urgent cares. Orthopedists were closing. Neurologists were closing. They're like, you got to help people. And he's like, oh, okay. So they'd already done the press release, but he actually verbally, and then changed the press release. He included us as essential. So it was very challenging. The first convention back was really, back in person, was very awkward, because, it was still like, do we wear a mask? Are we allowed to wear a mask? Do we have to wear a mask? And we always go to Kingston Plantation in Myrtle Beach, and they were fantastic for us. But it ended up being really good, but it would have been a lot worse if our association did not have the relationships that they have.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take a deeper dive into this. So take us, and I think people are very interested in this, and I think that this story about our association during the beginning of COVID can help some of our listeners understand the true importance of joining a state association. So take us back to March 2020. What happened in the chiropractic realm in South Carolina, and what were the steps that were taken by the association to help keep chiropractors open in this state? Because I don't think some people realize that we could have easily been shut down like other states, such as Kentucky. There were other places in the United States where chiropractors were not allowed to practice. This could have shut your practice down. This could have closed your practice. If you were an associate doctor, you could have lost your job. So take us back to the beginning of COVID and sort of talk us through the association and its role in keeping South Carolina chiropractors open.
So like I said, the main thing we have are those good relationships. And the first thing that the association started doing, even before all the media frenzy that they had going on, they were already starting to send us emails. They're like, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll keep you posted. They were already talking to the governor. They were talking to lieutenant governor. They were trying to figure out, legally, what can the state do? What can they not do? What can the federal government do? They had already been looking at all the different legal aspects of it and legislative aspects of it. We were getting emails like 2 and 3 times a week from them, which is a lot, but you want that because you want to be informed. And I feel horrible for people that weren't members, because they had no idea what was going on. They were lost, and I watched, like you said, you mentioned Kentucky. I have a great friend that he had called the governor's office, and they're like, we'll never shut you down. Never, ever. You're too important. And literally 20 minutes later, he heard the governor say, yeah, you're not essential. You're closed. I saw people spend $20,000 a year on PPE equipment. So we were very lucky in our area. But if we hadn't had those relationships, if we didn't have the lobbyists that we have, if we didn't have everybody, we have a managing company that helps us do all the administrative and all the legal aspects and the legislative aspects. If we didn't have capital consultants, we would not have been able to stay open. If they didn't have that good relationship to pull the governor aside and say, you can't do this, you've got to help keep us where we are, we would have failed. And it's sad because some people did. They didn't know because they're not members. They didn't get the emails. They didn't get the communication that we had to know, hey, we are essential. You have to stay open. You can stay open. This is what you have to do. And that's horrible because we need more chiropractors instead of getting them closed down. But because they're not members, they don't have access to that. We also have an amazing attorney. I like to say Annie's the best in the world. She's my favorite. But anytime we had a question legally, we were like, let's call Annie. You can always call the association, but you have to be a member. But Annie, she works round the clock helping us do everything. And she was also, we work very, very closely with the state Board of Examiners, which I'm on now. That's a whole nother ball of wax. But we already had that great relationship with the state board. And when you have continuing education, I'm the convention chair as well at the SCCA. The problem is we didn't know what we were going to do for continuing education. They weren't going to suspend it. You still had to get continuing education. And in South Carolina, you had to have in-person hours. You can only have so many online. And because again, those relationships, we've got a great relationship with a wonderful company that always comes to our convention, and they donated the live webinar equipment and allowed us to have in-person live webinars to get our continuing education. So if we hadn't had that, again, I don't know what we could have done, because they weren't letting more than 10 people together in a hotel. They weren't letting anyone have any conventions. You couldn't do anything. So we would have been really up a creek. It would have been bad.
So I just am curious, how was it with our governor, Henry McMaster? Did he give pushback, or was he totally open to keeping us in business? Or
he is, I like to say Governor McMaster is very much a friend of chiropractic. He understands the value of what we do. And he knew that our citizens had to have somebody to help them. There's, people weren't allowed in hospitals. You weren't allowed to come to an urgent care. We had several patients that had been on wait lists for orthopedists that would come. They ended up coming back to us because the orthopedists closed their doors, and they're like, sorry, we're going to be closed for a couple of years. We'll see what happens. And you can't, when you are hurting like that, you can't just live with it. So there was no pushback. He was all for it. And I honestly wonder if he didn't kind of not realize that we had been marked as being non-essential, because he was like, oh no, we're going to keep you on. We need you. And he values what we do.
I totally agree with that. I went to the State House in October. Our governor deemed October Chiropractic Month in South Carolina, and he was very complimentary of chiropractic and of our profession. So we thank him, and we are very appreciative that he kept us open in this state. My personal story with this, I have 2 office locations, and we're filming in our Greer office right now. And we opened this Greer office on March 19th of 2020. And we were very excited for our grand opening. We had a lot of patients on our books and on our schedule, and COVID hit and the world shut down that week. And I almost saw my practice die before my eyes. And I thought to myself, I've taken out a lot of money for this practice. We have new equipment. We are ready to serve this community. And I remember I dropped to my knees in the long hallway of this office, and I prayed to God that he would help us stay open, because I would have lost this practice and I wouldn't have been able to help the people in my community. And it is hard to go back and think about that time, but I think it's so important for our listeners to know what role the association played in keeping us open in this state, because I'm sure that my story is very similar probably to other people who might have faced closing their doors had they not been able to stay open. And not only not stay open, those are community members that we couldn't reach with chiropractic care if we weren't able to be in business. So I think it's just so important that everyone in any state is a part of their state association and they contribute to that monetarily and, if you can, contribute your time. So it's still a moving story when I hear it. I get chills down my spine when I think about other chiropractors that I know that were not able to stay open in the beginning of COVID. Okay, so let's talk about other aspects of your career. You are the president of the association, but you also own your own practice. So, what are some takeaways from owning your own practice? Like, how did it work when you were owning your practice and during your presidential run? How were you able to juggle those things?
It's it's not as hard as people think. That's a lot of people think if you're in the association, if you get involved, if you're going to be a district director or you're going to be treasurer, or secretary, or president, that it's this huge time sucking creature, and it's not, because we have such a good managing company. They're on board. Usually, I would get Annie is our attorney. I love Annie. She's the best. She would call me and go, "Okay, here's a weekly update. This is where we're at. What do you want to do?" So she kind of would condense things, and a lot of the things that are things that I really didn't have any business making the decision on. A lot of people have to understand it is a board. It's not, I'm not the empress of the universe when I'm the president. It's very much, it's a board decision. And so she was able to weed a lot of that stuff out so that I've got kids. I've got two very active teenage boys. They were in cross country and they're in the play, and we've got a farm. And I was able to manage not just working at one office. I work at both offices, and I kept them going. It was smooth sailing. And a lot of the reason it's smooth sailing is because we have such good people in the association on the backside, the people that you don't see, all the administrators that help line everything up. So it wasn't time consuming as much, but I felt a very huge responsibility because my father-in-law had been president. My husband had been president, and they had been, Richard Davis is one of our lobbyists. He had been hounding me for about 10 years before I finally said yes. And I'm glad I did, because the best thing about being president of this association, you see everything behind the curtain. So you get to see how hard everybody works. You see all the legislation they go through. I mean, it is stacks of stuff they go through every single day. You get to see the relationships that they have as well. And then you see how the board works as a team. I really like how the board works as a team. It's not a one pony show. It's everybody working together. And we don't go into the whole, well, I think everybody should practice this way. You should have this philosophy. We are not a philosophical association. You keep your right to practice. You get to keep your doors open. And that's the way it should be. So there were some little things that were kind of like a time crunch. Once you have that president, you are now Madam President, you get a lot of people crawl out of the woodwork asking for favors and wanting, oh, let's do this. Well, I can't, because it's a board and I'm not allowed to do that. I'll bring it in front of the board. So I think probably the biggest time crunch was just doing the meetings. And we used to always do in-person meetings, but because of COVID, we started doing some Zoom. So we do about half Zoom and then we do half in person. So just taking off time to get down to Columbia, which isn't that far, but getting everybody to Columbia can be kind of a challenge. Other than that, I really did enjoy it. It was really enlightening just to see all the backside of it.
Well, I think it's really important that you define that our state association is not a philosophical association. Everyone in this state, whether you're a member or you're not a member of our association, benefits from what our association does. And this goes for other states as well. So if you, in my mind, are benefiting from the things that an association does, I think everyone should contribute monetarily to this association that are doing good things for all chiropractors. And I think that is very important for people to know and understand. Our association is protecting our right to practice in our state. It's not determining how we practice. It's just that we can keep our doors open and that we can practice. And I think this is very, very important for all chiropractors across the United States to know and understand.
Well, and you have to understand too, my husband, when you're on a state uh, licensing examination board, you get to go and grade boards. Well, one of the states he went to was New York. He went to NYCC to grade part 4. He was talking to some of the doctors. They had over 20 state associations. They had no voice. They
Wow.
had the worst reimbursement, the worst representation. If you have one voice and you've got a lot of people saying the same thing at the same time, you have such an impact. And we've got all these chiropractors. And one thing that bothers me, I see a lot of apathy. It's like, well, let somebody else do it. Like the state association, they'll take care of it. I just don't want to pay dues. But paying dues and having those numbers, could you imagine if we had every chiropractor in the state as a state member, an association member? There's nothing we couldn't do because we
Right.
have this huge, huge voice where, we saw what happened in New York. They had nothing. Like their reimbursement it's sad. And they're so disgruntled because there's, over 20, who do you know to join? When you have all these little speckles everywhere, that's not going to light anything up. You got to have a big old bonfire to light it up. And you got to have everybody at the bonfire. And the way we do that is getting members, because you have to support what protects you, and they are here to protect you, long and short.
So if you are a chiropractor in South Carolina and you are listening to this, this is your sign to join the South Carolina Chiropractic Association. Rising tides lift all ships. And together, if we join, we can do so much more for our state than we're even doing now. So I hope this is inspirational for South Carolina chiropractors that are listening. So before we take a break, I want to ask you, Dr. Hughes, what would you tell yourself 15 years ago? What would be your advice to your younger self before you even started your career even?
I think one thing I would say is, everyone has highs and lows. When I first got into practice, it was low. It was very low because we had 2 doctors, 2 debts, a baby. And I'll be honest, we lived in my father-in-law's basement for 2 years as doctors. How fun is that? That's great, right? Yay. It was awful. But because we came into the practice, it's never a bad thing to ask for help. And I wish we would have asked for help sooner. We waited, we probably waited about 4 years too long. In my opinion, we waited about 4 hours too long. We really should have asked first thing, but ask for help and reach out and ask people that are successful. I wish we would have went to people that were like, man, I like the practice. I like those people. They've got it together. Because when we first started, it's like we're quiet. And we're like, I don't want anyone to know that I'm not doing good. Well, I'm not that person. I don't have a filter. It was not installed on this model at all. And so I would ask people and they would look at me like, why are you asking me? Why would you talk about this? Because I want to know, because I don't like living in a basement. So I wish I would tell myself, start asking quicker and listen to people that are successful and do the things that's going to get you where you need to go. Because you're going to get there, but depends. Do you want to wait 5 or 6 years, or would you rather do it now? So, and it gets easier and it gets more fun, and you don't know how much you're going to love your patients when you start, because they're all family. They're 100% our family now.
Well, I do think that there may be some listeners that may be struggling and may be trying to get by. So for some boots on the ground advice, what advice would you give our listeners today if they are struggling with their practice and they are struggling to make ends meet? What is the first step that you would take to getting help? What does that look like?
Honestly, join the association, because I always talk about the Palmer bubble. With that state association, you're surrounded by people that are going through the exact same thing. They understand where you're coming from. They have kids, they have older parents, they have farms, they have insurance people that quit, or they've got staff trouble. They are your resource. The other members are your resource. They're who you reach out to. And, you know, one of the things people don't understand about the state association, at least ours, if you have a legal question, we have an amazing attorney, ask her. If you have an insurance question, we have an insurance committee. We have coding specialists, ask them. And it's free. You don't have to pay them. You've already paid your dues. The dues, that's part of the benefit. But get in that bubble, get those people that'll lift you up, because you're not an island. You are this little tiny thing. And if you don't have people surrounding you, lifting you up, you're going to go under.
And it may feel like you're on an island, but like you said, in the association, there are other people that are in the same position in boat that you are, whether you know it or not. So this concludes our first part of this podcast with Dr. Hughes, and we look forward to joining you in our second part here shortly.
Thank you so much for listening. We are so thankful that you checked out I'm Simply Saying. We love empowering our listeners with the knowledge of chiropractic care and entrepreneurship. If you're curious about ways to stay in the loop about Dr. Duncan and her practice, feel free to check out her website, milliondollarchiro.co, and you can also check out her social media at milliondollarchiro. You can listen to I'm Simply Saying on all popular streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Like I said in the beginning, ultimately, wherever you listen, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, let us know what you'd like to hear and why. Reviews are helping us to know how we can best speak to our community, and they're always a good boost of encouragement as well. So again, we just want to thank you, and thanks for checking out this episode today.